What COVID-19 taught us about retirement. I'd like to welcome you. Normally, we would be in a classroom scenario. We might even have refreshments, probably not quite that nice, but we would also be pointing out where the restrooms might be. Tonight, what we're going to point out to you is the restrooms are up to your house plan, and of course, your refreshments are in your kitchen. But still, we are here to congratulate you on being with us because it says a lot about who you are. You're most likely someone who's approaching or maybe even in retirement. You've worked and saved your entire life and might be thinking about slowing down to spend time with grandkids or maybe traveling. We'd like to travel these days. You realize you don't have all the answers. In fact, you may have more questions than answers. In fact, you may just say, help, I need some help. Be open-minded, and hopefully the information we'll provide tonight will be of benefit to you. Tonight's presentation is educational in nature, and we will not be giving out diplomas at the end. However, we hope that there will be information you can use to strengthen your financial future. Educating people is a passion of ours, and rest assured, we're not here to sell you anything. So, ladies, put your pocketbooks away. Gentlemen, keep your wallets in your pocket as well. Our passion, again, is to help you through your retirement. Now, there may be a need for pen and paper because hopefully the information will be of value, and there may be some concepts that you'd like to write down, but more importantly, there may be some questions that you would like to your specific situation. So this really is a two-part presentation. The first part you're participating in now, which is the webinar presentation. But as a complimentary, no-cost obligation, there is a strategy session that you are eligible for by taking your time. Investing your time, we would like to give back to you. So you might say there are opportunities that are either missed or taken. Well, we hope that your investment of time, we're going to help you on those opportunities that you might want to take. Before we conclude today, you'll know the single biggest financial risk in retirement, and more importantly, how to address it. You'll also have an opportunity to sign up for that no-cost strategy session. That would be 20 minutes. And at the end of this presentation tonight, there'll be a short survey and an opportunity for you to sign up for your personal session. Who am I? Many of you have attended one of the workshops or clients, but I have been in this industry for 36 years, currently the president of Prosperity Partners Wealth Management. And a fun fact that some people know and some people don't is that the state of Tennessee declared June 14th Allie Swafford Day based on philanthropy. And that's another tenet of our Prosperity Partners organization. Here are the partners, and we all specialize in comprehensive planning and wealth management for clients who'd rather spend their time living their bucket list. So, what do we do? Well, you might already have one financial advisor that can do some of these things, maybe investments or insurance, but you might not have a financial advisor that can address all of the investments, insurance, estate planning, Social Security, healthcare and Medicare, and taxes. But we have 3 of these comprehensive planners plus 4 great team members, and that's Prosperity Partners. So, what has COVID-19 taught us about retirement? Well, the first thing is there are no guarantees. Life as we know it can change in an instant, and for unfortunately many that we know, it has already changed. We also know we shouldn't put off retirement, and our retirement savings may not be as safe as we thought. Our ability to retire when we want to or when we had planned to is at risk. Maybe for some of you, the reasons are totally different. Just like there are a lot of different answers to the COVID-19 question, there's a lot of reasons that you may have joined us for this webinar. We're guessing it's not because you're feeling as happy, excited, or carefree as this little guy. Things have changed in the matter of a few short weeks. And now much of the world is closed, much of the world is sheltering in place, and all of those affordable vacations that we could get away, well, this may look like what our weekend is. Bedroom to kitchen, kitchen to living room to patio. As a result, you may be feeling an emotion that you haven't felt in a while. Boredom, especially if this is your current situation. Well, all humor aside, you're probably here because you're concerned about the market falling, or that you don't have enough money saved for your retirement, or you're worried COVID-19 is causing changes that are making you wonder if you'll even be able to retire when you want. These are truly unprecedented times. A pandemic has hit the world and the United States, causing not only significant loss of life, but a great deal of uncertainty, economic volatility. It's changed the way we live and interact for every one of us. So we're going to focus on what COVID-19 market taught us about retirement. So what hasn't changed? Retirement and the need to get it right. You still want to make sure you have enough money to retire. You may have questions like, when should I retire? When should I claim Social Security, and what are the ramifications of that? What are my tax liabilities with my current investments? What kind of healthcare expenses do I have to cover? Or will it be covered by Medicare? And finally, what kind of lifestyle will I be able to have? Well, with everything that's going on, maybe this young child depicts how you're feeling: alarmed, concerned, confused, or maybe even like this, just freaking out and not entirely sure if I should go into a panic mode or not. But hopefully by the end of today's session, you're going to feel more like these little chilled out youngsters and have a little more clarity and understanding of how we can move forward. Now here's a tale of two neighbors. You may know one or the other. Neighbor one up there has 6 rolls of toilet paper. Uh-oh. Neighbor two didn't quite plan, wasn't prepared. So which one do you really want to be when it comes to retirement? If you're feeling a little more like neighbor two over there, well, this is the right place. Even if you're more like neighbor one, our stockpiles can only last so long. The daily news cycle and headlines certainly aren't making us feel any better. They're constant reminders of the turmoil being created by the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, we had the worst first quarter ever in the S&P. As we know, we've had unprecedented government spending, and employment has skyrocketed. So when something this drastic and unpredictable happens, in the financial world, we call it a black swan event. Now, what is a black swan event? The term is based on an ancient Roman concept that presumed there were no black swans. But later it took on a different meaning when in actuality black swans were discovered in 1697 in Australia. Now it's a financial metaphor, and what this means that events are considered to be improbable, unpredictable, or both these are black swan events. The point is we can predict some things to an extent, but not these black swan events, which creates both psychological and practical problems. There's a couple of black swan events that you may have heard of, and let's look at a couple of these. The first one is the financial crisis between 2007 and 2009, largely influenced by the collapse of the housing market. But the reality is that although the market did go down between 2007 and 2009, how long did it really take to recover that 55% drop? Well, it took months. In fact, it took lots of months. And if we look at it, the crisis from the time it began till the time we recovered was 53 months, 17 months of down and 36 months to fully recover. Well, what about the dot-com bubble? Back to September 1st of 2000 through October 9th of 2002. That black swan event was 25 months down and 42 months to fully recover. Well, here we are. We know that COVID-19 started in February of 2020 and the end to be announced. And just like the dot-com bubble and the financial crisis, this too shall pass. But there are three phases of a market. There's the buy phase, the sell phase, and the third phase, panic. And while the first two, buy and sell, may be inevitable, the third phase, panic, is completely avoidable with the right plan in place. So, what are those three major risks associated with traditional long-term investing? Market risk, interest rate risk, and sequence of return risk. So let's take a look at number one, market risk. Well, the stock market goes up and down. Many people compare it to a roller coaster, and everyone knows there are no guarantees. Well, let's look at the guarantees and no guarantees and roller coaster rides of the past. If you use the analogy, the old roller coasters look pretty tame. In fact, the volatility we're seeing today can be greater in 1 day or 1 hour than it was in 1 year back in the 1970s and 80s. This increased volatility has served to increase the emotional intensity many investors feel, causing us to panic. But let's take a look. The long-term growth has been great between March 2010 and March 2020. If you had put your money in, 100,000 would have grown to 250,000. Well, volatility is nothing new, but let's look at a broader market than just those 10 years. The bull markets are in blue, the bear markets are in red. And you can see that there have been more good times for the market, and they have been longer than the bad times. But there's no consistent way to predict when performance will be positive or negative. Investors staying the course have been rewarded over the long term. But what gets in the way? Well, one thing we know is that black swan events and bear markets don't last forever. We understand this in our head, but when faced with a falling market, this is when emotions can get the best of us. So what do we need to do? Stay disciplined through rising and falling markets. It's crucial for long-term success. But remember, if you think you can time the market, you might be in a panic mode. Now, what do I mean by time the market? It's a concept of pulling money out of the market while it's falling to avoid losing more, with the plan of getting back in at or near the bottom to enjoy the gains during the recovery. In reality, it's a guessing game, and one that's really hard to get right. Let's look at an example of trying to time the market. Remember back 2007 to 2012? Well, let's take a look at three investors. We have Kim, and her strategy was to buy and hold and invest $5,000 per quarter. And she continued to do this. But then let's look at Sam and Jack. Well, guess what? They too put their $100,000 in, invested $5,000 per quarter, but both of them cashed out December of 2008. Well, it was before the bottom of the market. They were trying to time the market. They also halted those quarterly investments. So what happened to them? Their $160,000 was now only $129,000. Well, then let's look what happened. Sam says, okay, I'm gonna get back into the market. And he started 7 months into the rebound. He took his $129,000 proceeds and resumed the $5,000 per quarter. Well, that was January 2010. Jack said, nope, I'm not ready to get back in. So he waited 19 months into the rebound, took his $129,000 of proceeds, resumed $5,000 per quarter. Well, how did that work out for all of them? Well, guess what? Kim, who just kept on investing, had about $890,000, whereas Sam, who waited till 2010 to start getting back in, had $745,000. And what about Jack? Well, guess what? Jack only had $639,000. So that's $250,000 less than Kim's account, and $105,000 less than Sam's. Well, what's the moral of this story? Well, the moral of the story is don't panic. Time in, not timing the market, is the best way to capitalize on stock market gains. But all of our portfolios are certainly not 100% equities. What about bonds? Even recognizing that the buy and hold strategy is a better one, it can be hard not to go in the panic mode. So many people say, I'm going to invest in bonds or bond funds or other fixed income investments, and that should be the answer. Well, that brings us to the next risk, which is interest rate risk, which is associated with interest rates moving up and down. We see in two different places, both the bond market and various types of savings account, this interest rate risk. And what do I mean by that? Well, how do bonds react to interest rates? As interest rates rise, bond prices fall. So there's an inverse relationship. And where are interest rates today? In our savings or in our CDs? We've seen them go down, down, down. Can they go any further? And what happens to bond values when interest rates go up? You've got it. They go down. So when we think of our bank accounts and CDs, we're not even beating inflation. And what does that mean to you? Well, it means your purchasing power decreases over time due to inflation being higher than interest being earned on our savings and CD. We know that a carton of eggs no longer costs $1.89. A stamp is no longer cents. So that's a couple of the risks, but what about sequence of return? Sequence of return, and I wouldn't be surprised if you've never heard of that. How does this risk work? Well, if you look at this issue of Kiplinger's, it says sequence of return risk, in my opinion, may be the biggest risk retirees face. So what does that mean? The risk associated with the order of the returns that your investments receive. Markets go up and down. Returns can be positive or negative, but does the order of good or bad years matter? Well, are you still confused? I wouldn't blame you. Let's explain it in a different way. I'm going to call this the money cycle. Most Americans go directly from accumulation into distribution. So how does the order or sequence of your yearly rate of return impact the end result during accumulation? Well, let's take a look at that. Let's meet Ms. Lucky and Mr. Unlucky and see how the order of their returns impacts the account balances during their accumulation, their working years, when they're putting into their 401k or outside investments. Well, let's assume we have $100,000 with an average return of 6% with no withdrawals. Ms. Lucky, woo, right out of the gate, 30% return, 20% return. But look at the end of her 10 years, years 9 and 10, she has a negative 20% and a negative 30%. So with no withdrawals and that average 6%, how did that turn out? $154,764. Well, let's take a look at Mr. Unlucky. Well, he had those bad returns, the 30 and the 20 in years 1 and 2, and the great returns, 20 and 30 in years 9 and 10. Still, 6% return, no withdrawals. Well, what do you know? In the accumulation phase, it doesn't matter because you had an average return of 6% and no withdrawals. But let's fast forward to their retirement years. While Miss Lucky and Mr. Unlucky have both aged pretty well, what happened to their accounts in the very same hypothetical rates of return during the distribution phase? Well, what's the difference? $6,000 per year in withdrawals. So once again, Ms. Lucky got great returns, 30 and 20 in years 1 and 2. Bad returns, negative 20 and 30 in years 9 and 10. Well, how did that work? Because she took out $6,000 a year. Not too bad. She still has more than she put in. She started with 100,000. She has 105,000. But what about Mr. Unlucky? Bad returns in the beginning, good returns in the end. Does he have the same 105,000? Uh-oh, less than 39,000. That's roughly a 2/3 drop in value simply because of the sequence of returns. So does sequence of return have an effect in the distribution phase? Absolutely. If we look at Investopedia, sequence of return is for the most part a matter of luck. If you retire in a bull market, your account may grow large enough to sustain a subsequent downturn. If you retire in a bear market, your account balance may never recover. This is not under your control as the investor, but there are opportunities to limit those downside risks. So what's the moral of the story? Losing money in the early years of retirement can really hurt you. So there you have it. As promised, the greatest risk to your retirement is sequence of returns. And if this concept is new to you, something you haven't been made aware of before, let's talk more about it in that 20-minute strategy session. But it's really important to work with an advisor who is not only aware of sequence of return risk, but knows how to minimize or eliminate it. So what can you do? Well, you may have heard the adage of the retirement red zone. The 10 years before retirement and 10 years after retirement. That's really when you're going to look at, I may need my money sooner rather than later. Well, we call this phase the preservation phase. It's a time period before and after retirement where you're highly vulnerable to sequence of return risk. This preservation phase is designed to protect that money that you're going to need sooner rather than later from extreme shocks and declines. When you add preservation between accumulation and distribution, your likelihood of success is vastly increased. So, how does that work? Well, now that you know what you can do to protect yourself from the greatest risk, how? We've developed a fairly simple way to implement the strategy, but it's an approach that most advisors simply do not use. The bucket plan. The bucket plan is a 3-bucket approach to segmenting your money based on your needs and your time horizon. Basically, we're dividing up the money or your assets according to what you need that money to do for you and when you're likely to do it. So let's take that concept and look at the now, soon, and later. The now bucket. The now bucket is designed so that you'll have between 0 and 12 months of income, safe, liquid money. If you have other expenses, such as you might want to buy a car or go on a vacation, that would come under planned expenses. And certainly an emergency fund for those things that are just unexpected. The water heater goes out, a leak in the roof. Well, this bucket is protected from market fluctuation, but of course the returns in the now bucket will be minimal. In fact, it probably won't even keep pace with inflation. So we don't want to have more money than needed in the now bucket, but what the now bucket buys is 0 risk and peace of mind. Well, let's look at that soon bucket, or you might call this the preservation. This is the one where we're looking at conservative investments. The average return in bucket 2 should be higher than bucket 1. This growth helps offset the rising cost of gas, groceries, and other daily living expenses. It gives you some protection from inflation. And then we look at bucket 3. And when we talk about later buckets, many times people say, oh, legacy planning. And they think that's for their children. But that's a very big mistake. Legacy planning is actually most important for the surviving spouse. Going from married to single tax brackets, the standard deduction is cut in half, marginal brackets shrink, and overall taxes go up dramatically. Added to which, losing one of the 2 Social Security payments and potential pensions, income is almost always reduced as well. So when taxes go up, income goes down. If we've not planned in this later bucket, then we cannot take care of our loved ones, both our spouses, and look out for long-term care or inheritance. So here it is, the bucket plan. It's a 3-bucket approach to segmenting your money based on needs and time horizon. It's a way to comprehensively structure your savings to tackle today's market challenges while meeting your immediate, short-term, and long-term goals. We're dividing the money up according to what you need the money to do for you and when you're likely to need it. But this is not what most people have. We call it the not quite plan. And this is what folks do. They accumulate and they say, okay, yes, I know I need an emergency fund, but then everything else is in that later bucket. Well, it is the soon bucket that can help us plan for market risk, interest rate risk, and sequence of return risk. So that preservation bucket is so critically. And this is for a portion of your money. And hopefully what we can avoid is this third panic cycle. So to put it another way, this is our powerful panic protection, because if the money you need sooner rather than later is safe, you'll be more confident to ride out the inevitable market ups and downs, even in the wild roller coaster ride that comes with a black swan event. Which brings us back to COVID-19 and what it's taught us about retirement. Black swan events have happened, including the one we're experiencing now, and will undoubtedly happen again in the future. And because we can't predict them, we need to prepare ourselves the best way we can. And how would we do that? Well, simple, powerful, and effective. A bucket plan. And if this approach makes sense to you, this is the perfect time to take action, and let us help you get your own customized bucket plan. We hope that what COVID-19 has truly taught us is that health is wealth. If you don't have your health, the rest doesn't matter. You are your most important asset. There's an Indian proverb that says a healthy person has 1,000 wishes, but a sick person only has one. We've all heard of health scares, but maybe what we're experiencing now is a wealth scare. And just like we rely a lot on expert medical advice to keep us healthy, it's equally important to rely on expert financial advice to protect our wealth. That's where we come in. We hope this is how you're feeling now. You'll remember at the beginning, our goal was to help you feel relaxed, hopefully carefree, and even in the midst of black swan events and the turbulent roller coaster ride, you'll feel that there is a way that you can develop your own plan. So, okay, what's next? So if this is of interest to you, what we would say is, after this event, make sure that you do take the survey. Do sign up for that 20-minute, no cost, just time to talk. Time to talk. Let's see what we can do to be of value to you. So our offer is for you to get together with us virtually, or if you prefer, by phone. So sign up for that strategy session. Let me give you an example. Now these two folks, and we'll call them Bob and Penny, are looking pretty happy now. That is after we've done some planning with them. When Bob came in, he said, I feel confident that Penny and I can retire with no problems. Penny, on the other hand, said, I don't know, Bob wants to retire early. And I'm just not sure from a medical insurance standpoint, from a Social Security standpoint, gosh, are we going to have enough money? So what we were able to do is to deliver a custom bucket plan for Bob and Penny, which showed them when we place their assets in the now, soon, and later buckets, we could bridge that medical gap until 65. We could bridge that Social Security gap so that Bob could delay taking his Social Security until 70, which of course was a big advantage to Penny. And when they saw the now, soon, and later, and saw that they really didn't have to lose sleep over their decision, They felt peace of mind. We'd like you to experience that peace of mind. We want you to feel relief and security, and we hope you'll take us up on that 20-minute virtual session. So until then, stay home, stay safe, but also continue to stay positive, but please test negative. Thank you.